Ferrum's span breathed like a tired iron animal. Steam drifted out of valve-mouths scabbed onto the underbridges, turning rain to a whispering mist that smelled of copper and boiled algae. The Ember Market sat where 3 tramlines stitched together, beneath a forest of scaffolds hung with old signage. Lamps the color of weak honey pulsed along a frayed cable. People gathered there less for trade and more because the vent heat pushed up through the grate and thawed bones. On a flat bed of dented alloy, a tall figure stood still as a mooring post. She was impossible to ignore. Nearly 7 feet, broad across the shoulders, hips built for work, not fashion. And she was vulpine, orange fur burnished dark where the mist clung, white along the throat, a long tail damp at the tip. A short leather strap circled both wrists in front, more a tag than a prison. Her ears were pinned low, not from fear, from calculation. Looking up to meet a stare only made crowds speak louder. She'd learned that long ago. Mixed stock, called the auction crier, a woman with ash streaks on her cheeks and a voice like a whistle. Labor. Not domestic. Not breeder. Someone in the front snorted. Another said, too big to keep. Eat or pull. The words landed as confirmation, not revelation. Jalen Morse stepped out of the north tunnel with a courier's gait, and the face of someone used to silence. 35, lean, with wind-tossed black hair and a half-week stubble. His coat was brown, long, and patched at the elbows, boots gray with salt. He wasn't a butcher. He wasn't a slaver. He kept inventory for the relay archive built into Span's middle ribs, the place where lost freight went to be counted, named, and forgotten correctly. Work of quiet hands and patient eyes. He had come for a ledger copy a stallholder only appeared with on auction days. 10 minutes in and out. He told himself that, even as his path bent nearer the platform. The vulpine's gaze was tipped to an empty place beside her feet, as if she could step into that blank and sink out of sight. Jalen saw the slack in the strap. Saw the way her chest rose, steady, despite the voices. Saw a boy point and giggle at the line of muscle under wet cloth. A butcher raised his hand with the kind of bid that weighed bodies by the pound. The vulpine's jaw flexed soft for rippling. Jalen lifted his hand. He named a number. High enough to erase the insult. Low enough to avoid spectacle. Heads turned. The crier stalled a beat, then knocked the block with a rusted spanner. A clerk shoved a chip tab toward him. Jalen signed, then added a second transfer. Cull flag scrubbed, permanent. The clerk's eyebrows climbed. No, Jalen said, and waited calm until the entry on the registry pulse refreshed and the ugly red mark blinked out. The leather came off. She stepped down, bare pads finding wet rungs. The way she moved, balanced, grounded, spoke of someone who had carried weight without dropping it. She stopped a half-pace behind him, not led, measuring. Your name? Jalen asked, soft enough that it wouldn't perform for the crowd. Vesa, she said. Her voice was low, edged with rasp, like wind on canvas. She did not add more. Walk with me, Vesa, he said. They left to the sound of steam and rain. Jalen didn't speak until they were under a narrow run of riveted roof where the drips hit a pan and sang. My place is small, he said. Dry. Locked from inside. She studied him sideways, slit pupils wide in the low light. Why me? Because they were measuring you for the cheapest purpose, he said. And because a line in a ledger is easier to change while a person is still standing on their own feet. She said nothing, but the angle of her ears shifted, listening, not flattered. He led her up a stair carved into the Span's spine, past doors with chalk numbers and the smell of boiling greens. His key turned. Warmth met them, faint but real. Inside was a single room, shelves of numbered boxes, a narrow cot, a ticking vent heater, and a table with 2 chipped bowls. There's hot water, he said, pointing to a stall partition. 20 seconds. Clothes in the top chest. Eat first. He set a bowl of noodle broth down. Vesa adjusted the knot of damp canvas that passed for her drape and lifted the bowl in both hands. The first mouthful closed her eyes. She ate slowly, aware of him only as motion at the edge of sight. He didn't fill the room with talk. He let the heat work. When she set the empty bowl aside, he didn't ask gratitude. He pointed to the stall. Water's warm. Her tail flicked once. She nodded and disappeared behind the partition. Jalen exhaled like a man stepping off a rope bridge that hadn't snapped. He leaned his shoulder to the bookshelf and watched the door, out of habit, not fear. He chose not to think about the butcher's face. Steam ghosted up from the stall. Vesa emerged wrapped in a plain gray shift from the chest. It was too short at her wrists, snug across the shoulders. The orange of her fur burned gold under the lamp. Scars traced pale through the coat, old rope, a crate edge, the mean handwriting of years. I work at the relay, Jalen said, nodding toward the stacks of boxes. Tomorrow's heavy. Crates need lifting, tags need reading. It's paid if you want it. If you leave in the morning, the door opens from the inside. Vesa's ears turned toward him. Rate? 10 credits for the day. Meals. More if the weights lie. Fair, she said, filing it with other facts, his hands steady, eyes not lingering, voice that didn't sell itself. She studied the door bolt, then checked the window latch. Not suspicion, learned ritual. He let her. Sleep, he said. Stall's yours if the cot feels too much like a trap. Her mouth moved at that, almost a smile, the surprised kind. The cot is fine, she said, testing the word fine like it might fight back. She lay down, tail tucked along her thigh, face toward the door. Say my name, she said, eyes closed but ears sharp. Vesa. She slept. Jalen sat in the chair with his boots still on, hands on his knees. He turned the lamp down and let the heater's tick count quiet seconds. The span moaned once, metal cooling, and then the city went about the business of not noticing itself. Morning came thin and gray. Jalen rose on habit, boiled water, and set 2 cups on the table. Vesa woke without a start, stretched slow, checked the bolt, then met his eyes directly for the first time. Her pupils narrowed a hair in the brightness. You kept the door locked, she said. You said fine, he answered. Fine includes locks. A huff escaped her, agreement or amusement, he couldn't tell. They walked out into rain that had decided not to fall, just hang in the air. Jalen took alleys by instinct to avoid the morning shove along the main vent. Why did they say what they said? He asked after the 3rd turn. In the market. About breeding. Because words are cheap and get picked up like coin, Vesa said. Old clinics wrote narrow rules and men read them as laws. I fit outside a shallow box. It costs less to believe the box than to widen it. Understood, Jalen said, and meant it. I'll avoid the box. Better to burn it, she replied without heat. The relay doors accepted his key. The air inside felt like an archive should, dry, cool, humming with stored electricity and patient dust. Stacks of crates made canyons straighter than streets. A sign read, Relay Archive, offline. Another below, Report Anomaly. Jalen glanced at it and thought, I am. Bay 4, he said. Tags are wrong. Straps split. We work together. On 3. They fell into a rhythm so quickly it felt like a memory. He read stencils. She lifted, pivoted, set. When a crate needed a higher shelf, he said, On 3, and waited for her nod before they shared weight. She moved like a person used to having her strength measured and misnamed, and determined to name it herself. At break, he showed her the hot tap. She washed, carefully working water into the fur along her knuckles. Her claws clicked faintly on the metal rim. He handed her a tin of noodle. She ate standing, eyes on the 2 exits. Jalen angled his own body so neither exit looked blocked. He didn't make a point of it. She still filed it with the other facts. After Bay 4, he said, we stop by Ledger Row. There's a man selling a copy of a shipment lost before the relay went offline. That was my excuse for being near the platform. Excuse? She said. Reason, he corrected himself. Better, she said, and scraped the last of the broth with a fingertip and a small satisfied sound that made him want to smile and made him choose not to, too soon. They finished Bay 4 cleaner than it had looked possible, wire replacing rotten straps, tags turned the right way round. Jalen noted totals on a board with grease pencil. The line moved etched, and he felt something in his chest exhale. Ledger rows smelled like paper and hot glue. Under a tarp awning, a thin man with restless fingers shuffled copies as if they might take flight. More, he drawled, lips smiling without eyes. Came for your lost lamb? Shipment 8C Raven, Jalen said, laying credits down neatly. Don't add rumor to the price. The copy slid across. The stallman's gaze snagged on Vesa as if on a nail. Jalen didn't look where the man was looking. We're done, he said. The credits didn't jingle when he moved, he made sure of it. A city clerk stepped in from nowhere, all gray jacket and boredom. Spot check, he said, scanning a handheld. IDs. Jalen presented his. Jalen Moore Relay Archive. Contract labor, Vesa, by the day. Sale reclassified. Flags removed yesterday. The clerk's scanner found Vesa's wrist stamp, a paler ink now. The device chirped, refreshed. The man nodded. Updated. Clear. No disgust. No pity. Just work in a queue. They walked away. Vesa kept her shoulders level. That's a good machine, she said. Boredom. Boredom keeps knives out of routine, Jalen said. It can cut anyway. But less often. Back at the relay, they resumed work with the same wordless cadence. When a strap snapped, Vesa caught the weight against her hip. The shift pulled along her flank. Jalen looked at the failed weave, not at the line of her body. Wire, he said. She watched his hands. He tested every twist and only looked at her when the crate was secure. By noon they had built order where a tangle had sat. Jalen counted it like a man counting breath. You just saved me a day, he said. You left space to change your plan, she replied. That saves days. Teach me to rotate every third, he said. Fewer crushed corners, she said. Harder to steal. Thieves expect neat stacks. Vesa followed him to the log desk. He marked down work done, one neat line per fact. He didn't write her name. He wanted to. He didn't ask first. Write assisted by V, she said, reading the want on his face and choosing her own letter. He wrote it, hand steadier than it had any right to be. Evening stretched thin over the span when they finally left. Vesa's gait had changed, less tight at the shoulders, more certain in the knees. On the stair, a neighbor in a patched sweater paused, looked at them both, and offered a simple nod that meant, I see you, no more, no less. Vesa returned it with equal measure. Inside the room, Jalen cracked 2 eggs into a dented pan and chopped a fist of greens. Food found its way to warmth. Vesa stood with her hands on the table edge and asked the most important question like a person putting a fragile object down carefully. What do you want from me at night? To keep my word, Jalen said. If you say the bed is yours, it is. If you say lamp on, it stays on. If you take my hand and place it somewhere, I keep it only there. If you don't want touch, we don't make any. If you change your mind, we change. She watched him for a long breath. Her ears turned a fraction. Where did you learn to speak like that? Listening and losing enough to earn it, he said. And deciding I'd rather lose alone on purpose than keep failing by accident. Good answer, she said. It wasn't praise, it was accuracy. She ate slow. When she finished, she stacked her bowl beside his without clatter. Tonight, she said, sit in the chair until I sleep. I will, he said. Say my name, she said when the lamp went low. Vesa. She slept. He stayed. Morning was cooler. The heater ticked and didn't catch. Jalen thumped the dial with a knuckle and listened to the element hum alive. Vesa watched him do it, then tested the dial herself, learning the exact pressure and angle like it might matter later. Everything might. At the relay they cut through a new bay, stacks taller than comfort, tags faded to ghost print. Vessa made a map of the Isles with her eyes and wrote it on her muscles. I worked barges, she said over her shoulder, casual as breath. Rivers up and down, for seasons. Slipped once. Knee took it bad. Healed. Clinic stamped me high cost. Coal teams read that as waste. Do you want to leave Span? Jalen asked, voice careful. To where? She replied, not sharp, simply true. Without sponsor, without travel credit? Outside is a place where your name is nothing. Here at least fear knows my shape. He offered no counter. He set his shoulder under a crate corner. On 3. They finished the morning with sweat polishing their forearms and grit painting their palms. Vessa stood at the hot tap and watched dirt sluice out of her fur in brown ribbons. Jalen placed a bowl of broth on the counter. She ate standing again, by choice this time, because her legs liked the work she'd done. What did they mean, really, yesterday? He asked. Too big to breed. Old box or something else? Old box turned to habit, Vessa said. The kind traders like. A sentence you can throw like rope and drag price down with. Then we don't use it, Jalen said. Burn it, she said again, and there was a soft, dangerous music in the repetition he didn't take lightly. They visited a seamster 2 floors down after the shift. The shop was a bright slit of a place, spools of reclaimed thread, fabric draped like flags. The seamster stood on a crate to meet Vessa's height and measured with chalk on the cloth, fingers quick and careful, never brushing fur without naming it first. 2 hours, he said. Pay now. Come back before lamps. Jalen paid. Vessa's ears tipped backward, she disliked debt kept as leverage. The seamster printed a chit with both names. Vessa folded it and slid it into the small pocket of her old canvas like she was holstering a tool. They returned to the relay for the evening log. A different clerk from Central stepped into the aisle, older, with eyes that had seen a lot and found little worth getting loud over. 7 most recent edits, he said. Jalen turned the terminal. The clerk's gaze snagged on the line, assisted by V. He looked up at Vessa's hands on the card handle, at the work already done. Efficient, he said, meaning the stacking, not the letter. The handheld pinged green. He left without giving the room a moral. Vessa let a breath go, a quieting, not a relief. Being read and not reduced, she said. That's a new sound. It is, Jalen agreed. They picked up the clothes before night. The work tunic lay heavy and honest across Vessa's shoulders. The trousers gave her stride without apology. She checked the seam at the tail opening, satisfied with the seamster's mind. In the shop glass she saw herself level and strong, not disguised, not displayed. She liked that the image didn't ask her to act. On the walk back, a boy Vessa recognized from the front row of yesterday's auction looked up, caught her eyes, and then looked down again with a small awkward nod that apologized without language. She let it land, either blessing nor grudge, and kept walking. Inside, Jalen brewed tea. Vessa stood at the foot of the cot, pressed her palm into the mattress once, then turned. If I want your hand, she said, tapping the back of her shoulder, I will say it. Only there. If I move it away, it stops. I can do that, Jalen said. He meant it with his whole chest. I know, she said, and for the first time she smiled with teeth, small and white and real. They worked like machines built by patient hands and tuned by consent. During a lift, when Jalen said, On 3, Vessa counted with him and not inward, letting the shared word touch the work. At break, he showed her the log legend, the little notches and dots carved into tagged corners by some dead clerk who had loved an orderly universe. You'll learn this in a day, he said. She learned it in an hour. Show me the terminal, she said that evening, head cocked, ears forward. Jalen pulled a stool over and woke the old screen. Boot text ran like rain down glass. Left keys navigate, enter selects. Escape backs up. Codes on the number row. If the field is locked, it will ignore you. Search for the sale number, she said, so I can see if the red lies are truly gone. He entered it. The record blinked into being. Sale rec, reclassified to labor. Flag cleared. Notes empty. Add a note, she said softly. Vesa contracted labor, early termination by worker's choice valid. Keep it clean. No nouns that turn bodies into items. He typed exactly her words. The cursor blinked, then accepted. You'll have edit access once I add you to the roster, Jalen said. I won't do it if you don't want me to. You will, she said, reading him. Because I do. They ate stew at a relay canteen table and let other people's noise cover their quiet. Back in the room, Vesa stood between his knees where he sat on the stool. I want your hand tonight, she said, voice low. On my shoulder only. You keep your breath where I can hear it. You keep your want where I name it. Yes, Jalen said, not like a promise he hoped to keep but like a rule he had already built into his bones. She lay on her side. He placed his hand where she had asked. Her fur there was softer than it looked, thick along the ridge, warmer under. He didn't move. He anchored his breath and let her. Count it. Her body tightened once, old reflex, and then loosened as she watched the count hold. She moved her shoulder against his palm, the smallest possible choice. You listen, she said, eyes open. I want to keep wanting, he said. Listening is how that works. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and let sleep take her like a slow wave. He waited the extra minutes that matter. When he eased his hand away, he did it only because sleep had renamed the room and the new name was stop. He honored the unspoken word. Morning smelled like oil and hot dust. Jalen took the heater faceplate off with a small screwdriver and rubbed a drop of joint oil onto the dial stem. Vesa watched, then asked for the jar and worked a thin line along a sore place under her shoulder strap. Here, she said, and placed his fingers there. Small circles. No more than this. He obeyed. She hissed once, the good kind, and then said, Enough. And he lifted away. At the relay, he had the terminal ready. You can start read-only, he said. Or I can add you now. Add me now, she said. Waiting makes the world think it decided first. He typed her name. The old system made a grunt like a stubborn door, and then slid open. Vesa's initials appeared where there had been empty space. She tried a small edit, base 7, row 3, top tier, strap repaired, do not blame factory. The field accepted the truth. She didn't smile. Her ears went forward, sharp with satisfaction. They cleared the west wall with hooks and a narrowed corridor. Vesa took the hooks, quicker hands, and Jalen took the stabilizer bar. She signaled lift with 2 fingers because it kept both their faces free to watch weight, not words. They finished in half the time he'd allowed. Your plan was wider, she said, tapping the board. My rotation holds better. I see it, he said, and changed nothing. They ate. 2 night shift workers argued about a broken winch 2 tables over until they noticed Vesa and dropped their volume without ceremony. Jalen leaned in close enough to be heard. After lunch, old diagnostics in Bay 9. We'll need to coordinate and not bleed. I'll do hooks, she said again. You run the tagboard. A central clerk with a perfect haircut stepped into the aisle mid-afternoon. Spot check, he said, holding the handheld like a charm. Last 7 edits. Vesa turned the screen and scrolled. The clerk's eyes hit her initials and didn't trip. He read the notes, checked a physical tag to confirm a date correction. Accepted, he said, and moved on. Vesa watched him go, chest easing on a beat she had been holding for years. Not approval, she said. Just competence recorded. That's all I want from the city, Jalen said. Approval grows knives. Record keeps them dull. They went home with raw knuckles and good ache. Jalen set bread to warm on the heater plate. Vesa washed and came out in the new tunic without the underlayer, tail swishing slow with a contentment she didn't hide. She rested her palm on the bed a moment, then looked at him with a precise, fearless gaze. Change the night, she said. You sit on the bed, back to the wall. Feet on the floor. I choose distance. He nodded, sat. She came close, close enough for breath to blend, and didn't touch. The quiet stretched. He didn't feel it. After a long minute she touched his jaw with 2 fingers, then the ridge of his eyebrow where an old scar nicked the hair. Look at me, she said. He did. I will kiss you, she said. All right, he answered. She leaned in. Heat found a path with no urgency to prove itself. He met her in the small adjustments, angle, breadth, length, without leading. Her chest loosened. She moved his hand to her hip over fabric. Here, she said. Not higher than the strap until I say. He held the border like it was part of the floor plan. Good, she breathed, against his mouth. Stay. He stayed. The next day's plan included something bright and necessary. I want a clinic baseline, Vesa said over tea. Not a report like a lash. Numbers. For me. Kept private. Station on Fallow Lane, Jalen said. Midday is slow. We'll go after Bay 10. Bay 10 was heavier than Honesty liked. Vesa worked it anyway, legs under, back straight, tail arcing for balance when a crate threatened to pull. At breaks she hissed when a corner scraped under the tunic. Jalen lifted the first aid tin. You can apply, or you can ask me to. She pressed the square herself, then guided his fingers to hold the edge while she tied cloth. Here, she said. He held exactly here. The clinic was the kind that tried for clean and made it to decent. A doctor about Vesa's age with a badge that read SAL, Jay typed with steady hands and didn't bother with the pity voice. Any pain? No. Old injury? Knee. Stable. History of pregnancy? A blink. None confirmed. The guideline you are thinking of, SAL, Jay said, eyes on the screen, was rescinded. Outcomes are individual. Box is gone. People still like the shape. We can draw a panel. You decide who sees it. Vesa met that with the same level gaze she'd used on the auction crowd. Draw it. Keep it mine. It's yours by default, the doctor replied. When she stepped into the waiting room, Jalen stood without searching her face for a verdict. Ready? He asked. Yes, she said. If the numbers say this, we plan. If they say that, we plan. I see them first. Agreed, he said. They picked up the seamster's mending on the way back, an extra seam reinforcement where tail met cloth. Vesa paid the man with a nod measured to the exact weight of the work. In the room that night, she stood by the bed and spoke like she wrote a clean log line. No chair tonight. Clothes stay until I say. Consent stays law. If I freeze, you wait. If I want, I say want. Jalen answered with the same paired truth. Yes, Vesa. I want you. I listen. She placed his hands under the hem of the tunic to warm skin along rib and back, kept them there like points on a map. She led with steady pressure and breaths that shortened in ways she allowed. When old alarm tried to push its way up her throat, she pressed her forehead to his and counted. He counted with her. The alarm receded like bad weather over the far ridge. Heat stayed. When she finally stopped, she did it because she was satisfied, not scared. She rested her weight along his side and let the room be exactly what it was, a door that locked and 2 people who kept their words. I will say it, she murmured later, voice calm. I choose you. I choose you, he said back, not as echo but as entry. He wrote it in himself like a ledger that refused to lie. The lab report printed in the morning like a warm, thin tongue of paper. Baselines. No contraindications. Further evaluation optional. Jalen didn't read it twice. He laid it on the table and stepped aside. Vesa's ears twitched. She read each line. She checked the code at the bottom. She laid a finger along a sentence that said no walls and exhaled once. Then she folded the sheet and slid it into the tunic pocket and patted it like a good tool. Bay 12, she said. Then, she looked at the door. The front desk. Lunch, he said. We can do it at lunch. They worked Bay 12 like they were being paid by the precise degree of rotation. Vessa's edits stacked up on the log, warped palette flagged, date corrected, strap repair noted. A clerk came. He read. He nodded. He left. Competence recorded. The tired song of a city functioning. At midday they stood before the desk clerk with a stack of keys. Jalen slid his ident across. Add a name, he said. Co-tenant. The clerk typed with the disinterest of someone doing their 20th bland miracle of the morning. The printer coughed out a strip. The new key clacked onto the counter with faded ink, J. MR/Vessa. The clerk slid it forward like a receipt for bread. Vessa clipped the key to her belt. The metal sound it made was small and vast at once. That evening she bought a pot with a flat base and a handle that wouldn't break. She hefted it, tested the rivet with a thumb. She washed it twice before it met the heater plate, and moved in the little kitchen like a person who had always lived there, and had simply been away for a few weeks. Barley, greens, a scrape of cured meat, nothing fancy, everything precise. You cook like you stack, Jalen said. I cook like I want breakfast to taste like supper if I do the same thing twice, she replied. Predictable is useful. After they ate, she placed both palms flat on the table like a person setting rules. Add me to the relay roster as permanent staff with full notes access. If the work is real, the record should be real. If you leave one day, I don't ask now. The system should know I worked. I did it this morning, he said, bad at performing modesty. She tilted her head. You did it before I asked? Good. She stood, untied her tunic, folded it, and set it on the chair. He stripped his shirt and did not try to be beautiful. Lamp low. Heater ticking. She sat, pulled him beside her, placed his hands where she wanted them, and did not ask them to wander. They did not. She led. He followed. Where alarm fluttered, they paused until the air got clean again. Where one pooled, they let it be water, not fire. I want you, she said after, the words plain and heavy. Not because you bought a line in a ledger. Because you keep changing it the right way when I ask. I want you, he said. Whatever this is, we build it for the shape it actually has. Good answer, she said for the second time, and smiled with eyes this time, which was a brighter thing. 6 months moved like an honest train, steady, scheduled, loud in the right places. The relay owls rang with Vessa's voice as often as Jalen's. Her initials became part of the log's alphabet. The front desk clerk said their names in either order, not fixed. In the market, vendors called out prices without looking at Jalen first. Children stopped pointing and started asking about hooks. At home, patterns settled. Vessa cooked twice a week. Jalen brewed tea every morning, 2 cups, no question. The chair retired to the wall. The bed stopped being a perimeter and became a center. Boundaries remained and shifted like landmarks, owned, not policed. A rain-blue morning, Vessa stood halfway dressed with her hand low on her stomach. Jalen saw the detail the way he saw a wrong tag, gentle, focused. She met his eyes. Yes, she said simply. He set his ledger aside. You're sure? I know, she said. The clinic will stamp it for tradition. But my body already told me first. He stepped close. He didn't touch until she touched him. Then we build for 3, he said, and it sounded like a plan and not a dream. I keep working until I say stop, she said. We keep the roster in your name while I decide how I like lifting with a shifted center. Your call, he said. Every day, every change. Weeks went by in work and small adjustments. Vessa moved to the terminal more. Jalen took the higher tiers. A clerk from Central came to argue about an old request form and found his voice changing mid-sentence when Vessa looked at him like his handheld was a spoon and not a spear. He settled on accuracy. Accuracy is contagious when someone keeps breathing calmly while you thrash. When the clinic confirmed what they already felt, They didn't sit in the waiting room to let happiness get thin under fluorescent light. They stepped out into the span air and bought fresh bread, split it along a street ledge, warm steam rising into colder rain. "We are not here because you took me off a flatbed," Vesa said, bread torn clean in her hands. "We are here because I walked with you after, and didn't stop. That's the story I'll tell. I'll tell them their mother wrote her name into a system until it accepted its own eyes," Jalen said. He could have added something about foxfire and stubbornness. He didn't. Words are better when they fit. They stood long enough to eat without hurry. The relay hummed. Ferrum's span breathed. The heater ticked when they got home like it was trying to keep up with the new heat in the room. There are days a city tries to chew you. Ferrum's span had fewer of them when you kept your paper in order. Weeks later, a message from Central arrived politely and late, a request form from months ago, stamped high costs by a clerk who had been demoted and enjoyed friendly knives. Jalen found it in a dead terminal drawer, the ink still smelling faintly of vinegar. "Name," Vesa said, hackles prickling in a line down her spine. Jalen showed her the stamp. She read it once, ears stiff, then let them ease. "Irrelevant now," she said. "We turn the teeth to wax. File nothing. People who chew at air get bored." "Choice noted," he said, and locked the envelope in a drawer where it would sleep and bother no one. Clean ledger by omission is still clean. That evening they stopped at the desk again. "Add a name to the door card," Vesa said. "As co-tenant, not dependent. If asked, I live here by choice." The clerk printed the strip. The key clicked against metal again and made the same small, huge sound. Vesa clipped it with the comb you use to set a stone into a wall you know will stand. That night, with the lamp low and the city making its decent noises, murmur, drip, the far clank of a tram, Vesa placed Jalen's hand on her stomach. Not a hint, not symbolism. Placement that pleased her. He kept it there and let his breath be the metronome. She fell asleep with her hand over his, both palms warm against the place where a new word might grow. "If nothing happens," she said before sleep, "we are still this. We are still this," he said. He meant it like steel. The relay started to ask for Vesa by name on days Jalen wasn't on shift. She arrived early, unlocked the side door with her key, woke the terminal, and sketched a bay plan in lines so clean even ghosts could follow them. She worked like a bell ringing true. People learned to lower their voices near her, not out of fear, out of respect. A body can teach a room by refusing to be shrunk. She rotated every third crate in a pattern thieves hated. She added small notes to tags the original designers should have thought of, corners that crush, paths that flood, handholds that lie. She fixed dates with explanations a clerk 20 years from now could read without having to call a memory. The city changed by 2 degrees and pretended it had meant to all along. At home, the kitchen shelf collected jars she chose. Tea lived on the left. Oil in the middle. Bread on the right under cloth. Jalen learned not to move things she arranged. He discovered that the joy he felt watching her sharpen the room into honesty was the kind that doesn't try to perform itself. It just shows up warm in your chest and sits down. One evening the heater dial stuck again. Vesa loosened the faceplate herself, dabbed oil, worked the stem, and said, "There," with satisfaction. Jalen handed her the cloth. "You fix like you kiss," he said, unable not to. "Exact. Thorough. No extra movement." She laughed with her teeth this time. "I kiss like I repair," she corrected. "So the machine works as promised tomorrow." "Best promise," he said. Ferrum's span kept breathing, steady as a big animal sleeping. Markets came and emptied. Trams stuttered and were coaxed back into faith with hammers. People did what fear and hope told them, in that order on bad days, the other way round on decent ones. The relay's lights kept humming. Jalen and Vesa built a life the way you shore up a bridge. No speeches, no banners, just careful work, sound joints, daily inspection, and the shared vow: if something cracks, we say it, we fix it, we do not pretend. When the baby kicked the first time, a small bird against Vesa's palm, She lifted Jalen's hand and set it over the flurry. He looked like a man hearing his name spoken back to him by a place he thought would never answer. "Stay," she said when the lamp dimmed. "I'll stay," he said. He always would. The storm came in sidewise sheets that turned the vents into organs. Ferrum's span moaned on 3 notes, and shook rain from its ribs. Jalen checked the relay's drains twice before first bell and once more after, a superstition disguised as diligence. Vesa arrived early, key already warm in her palm. She flipped only the aisle lights she needed and brought the terminal to life. "Central pushed a silent audit overnight," she said when Jalen stepped in. "Q shows comparative flags. Someone's trying to remap old call categories into the new schema." Jalen's jaw worked once. "Who?" "The name behind the script is a generic service account," Vesa said, scrolling. Her ears tipped backward. "But the change set targets bodies first, crates second. We do not let a lie enter by automation," he said. "Pull the diff. I'll alert the floor." They split, their practice divergence. Vesa exported the pending flag list and printed it with the uneven relay printer that smelled like warm dust. She ran a marker through each entry that touched living contracts. Jalen crossed the bays, warned the clerks, and pulled the main switch for remote updates, an old breaker with a satisfying clunk. The relay's network hiccuped, then settled into local only. "Locked," he said, returning. "We'll reconcile on our terms." Vesa's tail flicked once, a pleased metronome. "Teach me the reconcile tool," she said. "I want my hands in the wire, not only on boxes." He slid a stool beside the terminal. She watched his fingers for the sequence, then mirrored it, quicker by the 3rd line. An hour later a young inspector in a rain-sheen coat entered, handheld already raised. "Update channel appears unresponsive," he said, voice crisp with borrowed authority. "Why is this site in island mode?" "So we don't ingest unverified changes," Jalen said. "You can sit. We'll finish review, hand you a signed diff, and bring us back up." The inspector glanced at Vesa, at her hands on the keys, at her belly's new curve, and edited himself mid-phrase. "I'll sit," he said. He did. He waited. Boredom, correctly deployed, is a shield. Vesa read, flagged, and wrote reasons. "Legacy prejudice encoded as metadata isn't legacy," she said to the screen. "It's a weapon." "Write that," Jalen said. She did. By the time the storm eased, the audit was clean and the relay's feed came back up with a soft confirmation chime. The inspector signaled acceptance and left with his hair flattened by honest rain. Vesa watched the door close. "This place tries to name me small every few weeks," she said. "And then we name me back." "Every time," Jalen agreed. "As many as it takes." Jalen's brother arrived on a dry day with a wet look, a traveler sunk into his coat the way a turtle keeps its house. He waited at the relay entrance until the clerk pointed toward base 6 with a thumb. Rowan looked older by 10 years and younger by 3, the way people do when they've run away from a thing inside their own chest. "Jay," Rowan said, using the family nick that had no paperwork. "Ferrum didn't fall into the river without me." "It tried," Jalen said. He didn't smile and didn't nod. "You found work?" "Work finds a back," Rowan answered. He saw Vesa coming up the aisle with a cart, and the air in him changed shape. "You have help," he said carefully. "Partner," Jalen said. He used the word like a shelf bracket, functional and load-bearing. "Vesa, my brother Rowan." "Rowan, Vesa." Vesa lifted a hand in greeting, then set it back on the cart. "Base 6 needs the stabilizer," she said, offering Rowan a place to stand that wasn't his old life. He took the bar like it might judge him and found it didn't. They worked a half-hour on crates. Rowan sweated and tried to hide it. Vesa pretended not to notice until he would have hurt himself by pretending more. "Stop," she said. "Drink." He did. He watched her signal a 2-finger lift and smiled into his tin. "You turn the owls into a language," he said, half to Jalen, half to the air. Vesa did. Jalen answered. Later in the room, Rowan eyed the numbered boxes and the tidy bed and the kettle set handlin'. You found a life that doesn't apologize for itself, he said. Envy had sanded most of the sharp off his voice, leaving only a tired admiration. I found work that tells the truth even when people don't, Jalen said. That helps. Rowan nodded toward the heater. You still hit the dial, he said. Some things don't change. Vesa set a bowl in front of him without comment. He ate as if he hadn't in too long. After, he wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist and looked at Vesa with a blunt honesty he'd earned somewhere on a bad road. Thank you for keeping my brother honest, he said. I don't keep him anything, Vesa replied, ears neutral. He arrived that way. We just don't let the city talk him out of it. Rowan barked a laugh, the real kind. Fair. He dug in his pack and set a small wrapped parcel on the table. From a priver, he said. Tea that tastes like the inside of a cedar box. He slid it toward Vesa. She considered the gift, waited for strings, found none, and accepted with a nod sized exactly right. He left at dusk with a promise to return that sounded, surprisingly, like he meant it. You don't go back to a wound to prove you've healed. You go back because it's in the route to something you want. Ember Market lived on the same corner of Heat and Habit. Vesa and Jalen cut through on their way to a tool stall for a new strap weaver. The butcher who had bid by weight saw them. His face did a slow chew. He raised a hand not in threat, but in a confused hello the way men do when a story they wrote about someone else turns out to be wrong in the middle. Vesa stopped within ear's reach, not a step closer. You measured me badly, she said. Not venom. Statement. I measured the market, he said, shrugging the shrug of someone who thinks economy absolves ethics. You measured cheap, she corrected. And called it true. He looked at his boots, then at the crier's platform where no one stood. Seems the relay likes your hands, he said, vague respect creeping in where condescension lived rent-free. And your notes. I heard a clerk say the stacks don't collapse anymore. They never should have, Vesa replied. If you have to stand under them, you prefer the kind that don't. The butcher nodded once, slow. Fair. He didn't apologize. He changed the subject in the only decent way he knew. I've got ox heart at a price older men like. If your house likes stew, come by. Vesa glanced at Jalen, who gave the slight inclination that meant I will cook what you choose. We'll come, she said, because changing a person's ledger sometimes starts with a human word spoken face to face and a purchase that teaches a hand better work. They bought the weaver and the heart. Back at the room, Jalen sliced it clean as metal and Vesa salted like a patient tide. The smell filled the small space with a warmth not related to heat. Good, she said when she tasted it. We teach him with this receipt. And the stacks teach the city with your initials, Jalen said. We all learn, she replied. Slow is still real. At the relay, a winch sang wrong. Vesa stopped under it on instinct, ears pricked, tail gone still. The note in the cable wasn't fear, it was math. Kill power, she said, already stepping to brace the load with a hook. Jalen slapped the red lever, and the motor sighed into stillness. A crate the size of a wardrobe hung at an angle that would have broken the toes of someone who wasn't paying. Cable fray at the drum, Vesa said. It's talking. She looped the load to a brace and tied off with a clove hitch taught by Rivers. Fix the drum. I'll hum on while you work so you hear right. Jalen laughed into his wrench, surprised by the joy that came even with danger half hanging. Hum wrong, he said. She did, a thin off-pitch line that made the hairs on his arms stand. He tightened until the wrongness beat against the rightness and dissolved. They wrote it up exactly. Next week, a sign hung near the winch, if the cable sings, you listen. Someone had underlined it twice. The ink smelled like the canteen waitress's perfume. Competence spreads like a song you can't stop whistling. That evening, Vesa's shoulders hurt in the good way and the bad. Jalen warmed oil and waited for her to point. She guided his fingers to muscle over bone. Small circles, she said. Your machine hands help. He worked until the tight line let go. Enough, she said, always the calibrator. He left the jar open on the shelf, an invitation he wouldn't voice. She closed it, the acceptance he didn't beg for. They found a box of punched-in letters behind a dead terminal, stencils from when the relay pretended permanence. Vesa lifted an A and turned it in her palm. The edges were clean, the holes clever. We could stencil names on the bay faces, she said. Not numbers alone. Letters teach faster. Do it, Jalen said. Write a guide that reads like a person wrote it. She did. She kept it short and shaped like sense. Bay names are letters. Rows are numbers. Every third rotates. If it sings, listen. If you're tired, stop. If you don't know, ask. If you lie, leave. The last line drew a complaint from a clerk who liked softer words. Vesa read his note, crumpled it deliberately, then smoothed it and pinned it beside the guide. We don't lie, she wrote underneath. We can handle the sentence. No one removed either. The pinned complaint became a joke that pointed at a lesson. Even the clerk laughed, eventually, and started telling new hires, we don't lie. Or if you do, Vesa will staple your nonsense to the wall until it learns better. Late summer, the span put heat back into the world like a drunk man returning borrowed money. Vesa walked lighter, then heavy, then light. Work adjusted itself around her without pity. Respect is lighter to carry. She still came early, still wrote notes, still rotated the third. One afternoon, she steadied herself against the terminal, a hand flat as if the metal were the river and she needed the current to remind her which way to face. Jalen was at her side without touching. Water, he said. She drank, made a face, laughed at her own face. The baby hates stale, she said. Then we boil fresh, he replied, already turning. She looked at him then as if measuring whether his patience hit a sharper thing. It didn't. You keep not grabbing, she said. I keep not grabbing, he answered. You keep deciding. She nodded. Then keep your hand here, she said, placing it over the small of her back. Not a fix. A presence. He stood like a post where she'd planted him, giving her something to lean on that wasn't a claim. They ordered a second stool for the terminal, shorter, with a bar to hook her foot on. The day it arrived, she sat, tried it, and said, Good. A clerk came by and said, Do I call it a maternity stool? Vesa looked over her shoulder and answered, Call it a stool. And the clerk blushed in a way that taught a better vocabulary faster than a meeting. Central sent a letter that cut and didn't, paper knives full fast hands. It said, Due to capacity, the relay may consolidate. The words were quiet, but they spoke of boxes on the move and owls going dark. We'll be asked to prove we matter, Jalen said, setting the letter on the table like a thing that might catch. We already prove it every day, Vesa said. But proof doesn't count unless someone is forced to watch. She tapped the letter. We show them how often this place kept a machine from killing a hand or a lie from devouring a person. We bring the names. Jalen pulled months of logs, near misses prevented by a note, shipments found because a date was fixed, people's flags cleared before a team with colder tools could arrive. Vesa wrote the cover like she wrote the bay guides, clean and readable. If you close this room, the city loses memory. When cities forget what they moved and who they harmed, they get mean. Keep this room alive if you want your trams to hum, and your people to stop whispering. They delivered it to a tall office with fake plants and a receptionist who knew how to look important and kind at the same time. The director read the first page standing, then sat, then called 2 others, then said, I need a week, in a tone that almost apologized for bureaucracy's heartbeat. A week later, the letter that came back said, Relay consolidation postponed indefinitely. The word indefinitely is as close as paper gets to mercy. Birth is a door you plan for and can't fully. The clinic's plan was solid. Vesa's plan was simpler, decide each minute. The night it started, rain sifted down like sifted spice. Vesa stood by the table, eyes narrowed, ears tilted forward in concentration. No, she said with a calm that lifted hair. Jalen's chest made a noise and then learned to shut up. He took the bag that had been waiting, cloths, proof of identity, a tiny folded shirt Vesa had mended twice for luck. They walked with their hands not clasped, but close enough to touch if either needed. The clinic lights felt too bright until a nurse with a tired, kind face said, "We dim," and did. Vesa labored like she worked, clear requests, no speeches. Water. Back. Not there. Here. Count. Stop. Jalen counted. He held exactly where she placed him and nowhere else. When adrenaline tried to make him heroic, he narrowed himself back down into useful. Hours are both long, and not in rooms like that. The sound when the baby took air was smaller than Jalen expected and larger than his heart had prepared for. Vesa closed her eyes, not to flee, to memorize. The midwife placed a small orange furred bundle on Vesa's chest. The baby blinked like a fox at daylight. "She has your ears," Jalen said, voice gone wrong with joy. "And you're stubborn," Vesa answered, already reading the set of a jaw that could only come from two people who made plans and kept them. They stayed until morning because the clinic liked to ensure beginnings didn't pretend to be endings. On the walk home, the span smelled cleaner than usual. People didn't stop them because you don't interrupt a family carrying a new person unless you're an animal without culture. At the door, Vesa handed Jalen the key. He opened. Inside, she set the baby, wrapped and blinking, on the bed and said, "We need a third cup." "I'll brew," he said. He did, and set the tiny cup on the shelf, empty for now, a promise shaped like a tool. Babies know how to tangle time. Nights grew loops. Days learned to be soft around edges. The relay allowed a week of absence without docking, a policy Vesa knew she'd earned for a dozen others with notes, written months before. Jalen used his leave in pieces, stitching a net of rest under the nights. Neighbors who had always minded their own brought small, practical things, a jar of broth, a bundle of clean rags, a wooden rattle carved like a tram. The patched sweater woman down the hall pressed a hand to Vesa's forearm and said, "You look like yourself plus," then left before the sentence could overstay. Rowan returned with a smile that had a road's dust in it, and stood at the door until invited. He looked at the baby as if she were a map to a place he'd suspected but never found. "Name?" he asked, voice hushed the right way. "Lark," Vesa said. "Because she sang as she arrived. And because dawn is better than dusk." Rowan nodded. "Lark more," he said, testing the music. "Or Vesa's lark?" "Lark," Vesa said. "A person, not a property." Jalen wiped at his face with the heel of his hand and blamed steam. Rowan didn't call him on it. At 3 in the morning of the fourth night, Lark decided the world was a bright thing. Vesa sat with her by the heater, humming wrong on purpose to match the baby's half-pitched noises, smiling at the winch memory. Jalen brewed tea and set it within Vesa's reach, then took up the chair again, not out of need, out of ceremonial affection, and kept watch across a room that held 3 steady breaths. Returning to work isn't a test, it's a calibration. Vesa opened the relay door with Lark sleeping wrapped to her chest and Jalen carrying the bag with more pockets than sense. The clerk at the desk looked up, smiled in the small way that keeps respect straight, and said, "Welcome back, V." No soft voice, no rush to help where help wasn't asked. Exactly right. In the bay, Vesa walked the aisles with Lark humming against her. Work slowed a notch not because she couldn't, because deciding slowly is a luxury you get to claim after surviving a market that measures you by speed. She checked the winch sign, ran a hand along a strap, and smiled at a tag note she didn't write and liked. The young inspector from the storm day appeared with a handheld and an expression that had learned something since last time. "Spot check," he said. "Also, congratulations." He cleared his throat. "On the indefinite postponement," he added, bureaucratic reflex catching up. "Thank you," Vesa said, letting him off the hook with grace he hadn't earned but could learn from. She turned the terminal, scrolled. Lark shifted, made a small fox noise, returned to sleep. The inspector nodded to the notes, accepted the entries, and left quicker than he came, which is how you know someone is growing. Jalen leaned against a stack and watched Vesa write one clean sentence. Bay 4, third rotation adopted site-wide. Credit Teokia, clerk, for initiating. She hit save and met his eyes. You share the lines, he said. They write better when more hands hold the pen, she answered. They finished early. On the way out, they passed the butcher, who lifted a hand in the unremarkable way you greet people you do not own and would be bored trying to. Vesa lifted hers back the exact amount. The market air smelled like fry oil and rain-cooled iron. Lark sneezed and made a face that looked exactly like Jalen's when tea was bad. Vesa laughed, clean and bright. At home, Jalen added another hook by the door for a tiny coat that would one day hang there. Vesa set the pot on to simmer and watched steam rise. Stay, she said when the lamp went low, the same word that had started a life and kept it steady. I'll stay, Jalen answered. He always would.